to get the list of the sponsors. Okay, and we'll start, I'll start that list off. Year of Learning by Dov Bodlander in memory of his wife, Adele Bodlander, Odel Bas Yehuda Tzvi. Dr. Paul Konigsberg, in memory of his brother, Dr. Sam Konigsberg, Shimon Ruven ben Labish. Ed Goldberg's cousin, Nissen Hara Nissen ben Fardosa. Paula and Bob Bromberg in memory of their dear friend Julian Smith, Yehuda ben Yisrael. Malka Mann in memory of her family murdered in the Holocaust. Harav Tzvi Hirsch ben Shlomo Yaakov, Sarah Bas Ephraim, Yisrael David ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Ephraim ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Adiya Bas Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Miriam Bas Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Pesel Bas Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shalom ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shlomo Yaakov ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shmuel ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, and the many friends of Dr. Marvin Blush, Moshe Shalom ben Yitzchak Halevi, friends of Toby Paris, Sarah Tober bat Yisrael Dov. A month of learning sponsored by Gary and Marcia Schrager. In memory of his father, David ben Yosef, and his mother, Freda Bas Hendel. A month by Dov Bodlander. In memory of his father, Tzvi ben Yaakov Yitzchak, his mother, Bela Dvasha Bas Harav Dov Bear, his father-in-law, Yehuda Tzvi ben David Nachum, and his mother-in-law, Alta Chaya Bas Avram Yosef. A week of learning by Michael and Judith Poretsky, in memory of his father, Gershon ben Chaim Tzvi, by Vicky Rabinovich Fish and Larry Fish, in memory of her mother, Ita Bat Tzvi, her father, Chaim ben Shlomo, and his father, Avram ben Shlomo, and the family of Malka Levi, in memory of her husband, Avram Chaim ben Zalman Leib. Today is the 26th, and we have a Day of Learning Plus Torah Fund sponsored by Marcia Federbush, in memory of her father-in-law, Harav Shimon ben Tzvi Hirsch, as well as a Day of Learning sponsored by B. and Stan Monsowitz, in memory of her father, Zam Zeltzer. May the Neshamas have an Aliyah, Kranka, Rafia, Velta, Yashir, Shem, Matzliah, and L'chol B'nai Israel, a good gebench Giar. Okay, I think, I'm guessing other guys have gotten joined on, right? To maybe Robert and Irwin, and I hope, okay? And
morning, Robert.
Good morning. So we're going to get underway. I just want a quick review in the point that when we finished Ted Zion Amud Beis, on the very bottom, we saw that Rav Nachman had made a statement in regards to one person getting a 2 base seyar, 2 people getting 2 base seyar, and 3 forming a shayara, which allowed them 6. The Gemara challenged that, and he recanted his statement, right? Where at what point he then said the following, that what they meant to say was that an individual gets 2 base seyah, allowing 2, that, and 3, so that 2 base seyah for 2 people also, and the 3 people get our caravan. And that's where we ended, except that the 3 people, okay, get all the land that they feel that they need. And that was the bottom of Ted Zion Amud Beis. The Gemara now, as we continue on the top of Yud Zion Amud Aleph, is still not happy with Rav Nachman's recanting and challenges that statement. And so he proceeds, Resha, the early part of our statement, of Rabbi Nachman's statement, Rabbi Yossi b'Rebbe Yehuda, seems to follow the view of Rabbi Yossi b'Rebbe Yehuda, namely that 1 or 2 individuals each can get only 2 base seyah, v'seifa Rabbanan. And the end of Rav Nachman's statement seems to follow that statement, okay, of the rabbis. Okay, so what happens? And yes, says the Gemara, Mishum dekai avuha b'shitate. Why? Because this may sound like inappropriate logic, but it's because his father holds to that system. In other words, basically he and his father are maintaining the same approach. Amar Rav Gidl, says Rav Gidl, Amar Rav, in the name of Rav. Okay, the following. Okay, Shlosha, with regards to 3 people. Okay, what happens? It could be that they don't get 6 Beit Seah. B'chamesh asurim, b'sheva mutarim. That it could be that with 5, they are forbidden, okay? At 5 Seah, and 7 Seah, they're permitted. Amrule, so they said to him, they challenged then Rav Gidl with the following, okay? Amar Rav Hachi, did Rav really say this? Amar, he said, Laho, to said to them, Oraita, Nevi'ai, Ktivai. He's taking an oath by the Torah, by the prophets, by the writings, the Amar Rav Hachi, that indeed Rav said this. So the Gemara now continues. Amar Rav Ashi. Rav Ashi says, my kasha, what's the problem here? Dilma Hachi Ka'amar. Maybe this is what he meant when he said it. Utzrechu l'sheish, if they needed land for perhaps 6, okay, Beis Sheah, v'hekifu b'sheva, but they enclosed 7, afilu b'sheva mutarim, even then with regards to the 7 Beit Seah, it's permitted for them to carry in that area. Lo hutzrechu elech lechamesh. If all, I'm going to translate it, if all they really needed was only 5 Beit Seah, v'hikifu b'sheva, and they then enclosed for 7, afilu b'chamesh asurim, then even for those 5, right, we would say that the 3 people are prohibited. Ve'ela, rather, the katani ubilvad shelo yehe b'tayim panui. And this is always with the condition, okay, that they are clarifying, all right, that there not be an area of 2 Beis Seah that are left vacant. So Gemara now is going to raise the following question. Mai, right? Lav panui b'me'adam. Are we saying that it has to be clear, totally vacant from people? Lo panui mekelim. No, says the Gemara. We're saying that it's vacant of any kind of articles. Okay? In other words, not just people, but objects, animals, equipment, things like that. Okay? So having said that, okay, we see that that's an explanation that's given to justify the statement that Rav Gidl quoted for Rav. Now, let's go on. Okay, Itmar. It was stated as follows. Shlosha umet echad mehen. Let's assume you have 3 people a shayara, and all of a sudden, a Friday night, okay, or Saturday morning, one of them passes away. Shnayim v'nitosfu alehem. Or say you had 2, and then suddenly over Shabbat, they were joined by another person, okay? Rav Huna, of course, the question is going to be, what's the situation? Rav Huna v'Rabbi Yitzchak. We have now a dispute, okay, between Rav Huna and Rabbi Yitzchak. Chad amar Shabbat goremet, v'chad amar diorin gormin. Okay, one claims that it is the arrival of the Shabbat, okay, that says whether the partition is valid or invalid, right? And the other disagrees and says it's really more that based on the number of people, the residents there. Tistayim, the Rav Huna, hu de amar Shabbat goremet. You might want to conclude, says the Gemara, that it's Rav Huna is the one who said that the arrival of Shabbat is the criteria to say whether it's valid or not, right? Why? The Amar Rava, as Rava says, Ba'aye mi Rav Huna, okay? That he says, I once inquired of Rav Huna, Ba'aye mi Rav Yehuda, and I once also asked about Rav Yehuda, the following, Irev derech hapetach, okay? If we say that that there were courtyards that were joined by an eruv, v'nistam hapetach, and then the entrance area somehow got closed up or sealed, derech hachalon, they made an eruv by means of some sort of a window, okay? That was in an adjoining wall, let's say. V'nistam hachalon, and that window got closed up over Shabbat. Mahu, what's the status? V'amarli, and they said to me, Shabbat, ho'il v'hutra, hutra, tistaye. Okay? That since it was the arrival of Shabbat, and at the time that Shabbat came, the Eruv was valid and it was permitted, therefore it's permitted, okay? And that would seem to be the case. Lema Rav Huna. So let's say, right, that you might conclude then that it was the Rav Huna, okay, that was his view, okay? But on the other hand, the Gemara is going to say, Rabbi Yitzchak, Lema Rav Huna v'Rabbi Yitzchak, beplug to the Rabbi Yossi v'Rabbi Yehuda kamiflage. Maybe we're going to say that wasn't the case, but that the argument between Rav Huna and, okay, and what we saw before, and Rabbi Yitzchak, okay, that this argument, all right, was based on another argument between Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda, the Tanan, where it was taught there in a Mishnah, Chatzar shenifritza mishtei ruchoteha, that namely, if you had a courtyard that was breached on two sides on the Shabbat, right? And therefore, what's the situation? V'chein bayit shenifratz mishtei ruchotav, or a house that was breached from two different directions, right? V'chein mabui shenitlu korotav, or likewise a alleyway in which it's korah, in which the cross beams, right, could have come down, gotten removed somehow, okay? Mutarim la'ota Shabbat, va'asurim la'atid lavo, divrei Rabbi Yehuda. That for that Shabbat, it was may still continue to carry, but for future Shabbats, Shabbatot, unless of course it's repaired or corrected, they are not permitted. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. This was the view of Rabbi Yehuda, which would seem to say he held that it was the Shabbat that was the criteria, okay, which if it was okay on the start of Shabbat, it was therefore continued to be okay on that Shabbat. Rabbi Yossi Omer, mutarim la'ota Shabbat, mutarim la'atid lavo. Rabbi Yossi is disagreeing, and he says if it was permitted for that Shabbat, it's permitted for future Shabbatot. Okay? V'im asurim la'atid lavo, and if it would be forbidden for the Shabbat in the future, asurim la'ota Shabbat, it should be prohibited, okay, for that same Shabbat as well, okay? That the law doesn't depend on the start of Shabbat, but implication being it would depend on the people, okay? Lema Rav Huna, that it's Rav Huna, the Amar ka Rabbi Yehuda. Shall we say then that it's Rav Huna? Okay, that said like Rabbi Yehuda, that the Shabbat was the criteria. The Rabbi Yitzchak, the Amar ka Rabbi Yossi, and that it was Rabbi Yitzchak that said like Rabbi Yossi. So the Gemara now tells us, Amar lach Rav Huna. Rav Huna, however, is going to tell us as follows. Ana, the Amrei Afilu Rabbi Yossi. I could say my position even according to the view of Rabbi Yossi. Why is that? Ad kam lo ka'amar Rabbi Yossi hatam. Up to that point, Rabbi Yossi only said it there. Ela delit nehola mechitzot. Okay, in a situation where there was petitions were not there; they were lacking. Hacha itnehu lemechitzot. But here we say that there are mechitzot, there are valid partitions. The Rabbi Yitzchak Amar, and Rabbi Yitzchak, the Baal Plugta to Rav Huna, could come back and say the following: Ana, the Amrei Afilu Rabbi Yehuda. I can say my view even according to the statement of Rabbi Yehuda. Ad kan lo ka'amar Rabbi Yehuda hatam, ela l'de'itnahu l'diurim. That Rabbi Yehuda only said that his position there. Why? Because he could argue, right, that basically that there were residents there, okay? And the change of residence, number of residents doesn't affect the law, all right? Okay. But here, in this case, we don't have any residents, okay? And therefore, Rabbi Yehuda would agree that the law has to change to conform with that. Okay, Gemara now is going to continue, however, citing the next part of the Mishnah. V'chachamim omrim echad mishnei dvarim. But the sages, remember, were saying that it could be one of two things. It did not have to be both vertical and horizontal. It could be one or the other. Okay. Hainu Tanakama. Isn't that the same as Tanakama? Asks the Gemara. Okay, that either one or the other is acceptable. Ika beinayu yachid b'yishuv. The difference between them is an individual in a community. Okay. What does that mean? It means that we could say that according to one, it says it applies to only a shayara, okay, and not to an individual. Or if the individual, the other group, says that a person lives in a community, then that community provides partitions that are valid, okay, in that area. And therefore, one does not need to worry about whether it's vertical or horizontal or only one. Okay. Let's go on now. Okay, we're looking at a new Mishnah, right? And the new Mishnah told us that at least according to Rabbi Yehuda, right, there was a leniency in regards to the caravan, right? Now, the new Mishnah is going to clarify, are there other situations where we have leniencies, okay, in regards to certain behaviors, particularly even the one that we're discussing, namely that of Eruv, enclosure, carrying within a designated area. So our Mishnah says, Matnitin arba advarim petru b'machaneh, that there were 4 items or 4 elements, aspects, rules, things like that, that were permitted in a military camp. Number 1, mevi'im eitzim, right, that mikom makom, that they can bring in wood from any place. Okay? Number 2, upturin mirechitzat yadayim, that they're exempt from hand washing. And we're going to see the Gemara is going to actually clarify that. Okay. umidamai, and they're exempt from demai, in other words, eating demai, and mila arev. And here's our example from the requirement of making an eruv. Right? Gemara. Tana Rabbanan, says the Gemara. We learned in a Braita. Machaneh hayotzeit lemilchemet harishut, a military camp where they've gone off for a war that's a war of discretion, okay, as opposed to a war of obligation, conquest. It's part of conquest of Eretz Yisrael. Okay. Mutarin bagezel eitzim yaveshin. They are permitted even to steal, if you will, okay? Requisition, dry wood. Okay? Rabbi Yehuda ben Tema Omer, af chonin b'kol makom. Not only that, he says, but they may camp in any place, which means not just public property, but private property. Ubemakom shenehagu sham nikbarim. And also, he says, and in a place where the soldiers may have died in battle, you bury them right there. Okay? So the Gemara clarifies, mutarin begezel etzim yiveshin, where it says that they're permitted to steal, requisition dry wood. Hai tekanta Yoshua hava. This was an enactment of Joshua. The Amar Mar, as the master says, Asarat Naim hitna Yehoshua shehiyu mar'im bechorshin umelaktin eitzim mistoteim. That there were 10 enactments by which Joshua said, therefore, that in regards to gathering and low bushes and branches and things like that, okay? Right? And therefore, gather them from the fields. So the Gemara answers, Hatam behizme vehigi. Maybe there it talked about low branches, namely shrubs and thorns. Hacha b'shar eitzim. Here, it seems to be talking about other kinds of wood. Inami, or perhaps hatam b'mechubarim, hacha b'tlushim. Or maybe there they were talking about wood that was still attached. And here we're talking about wood that is loose, okay? That is detached. Inami, or perhaps hatam b'lachin, hacha b'yaveshin. Here, maybe, they're talking about wood that is moist. And here we're talking about wood that is dry. Okay. Now, Rabbi Yehuda ben Tema Omer, Af chonin b'chol makom, u'b'makom shenehagin sham nikbarim. He said, right, that they can camp in any land, private or public property, and that's where they are buried, where they are killed. Pshita, that's obvious, says the Gemara. Meit mitzvah, who? Wouldn't we consider that a meit mitzvah? Meit mitzvah konem mekomo. And we say that a meit mitzvah, okay, basically acquires its site. Lo tzricha. No, we needed to say this ruling, okay? Why? Afal gav de it le kovri. Why? Because the question is, are there those who are prepared to bury him? The Tanya, as we're taught elsewhere in a Braita, Ezehu meit mitzvah. What is a meit mitzvah? Kol she'ein lo kovrim. One that doesn't have relatives or individuals to bury him. Kore v'acharim omein oto. If somebody were to call out and others would answer him, in other words, the dying person, ein zeh meit mitzvah. that is not considered a mate mitzvah. Umate mitzvah kana mekomo, and do we really say that the mate mitzvah has rights to the spot where he is? That's where he has to be buried. Vahatanya, but aren't we taught elsewhere in another braita? Hamotse mate, right? One who finds a corpse, a dead body, mutal besartaya, and he finds it stretched out on a main thoroughfare. Mafnehu liyamin astaraya, ulismol astaraya. He may move it, okay, either to the right or the left of the main thoroughfare. Sadeh bur v'sadeh nir. If he finds the body in a uncultivated field or in the plowed field, mafnehu l'sdeh bor. He moves it to the uncultivated field. Sdeh nir usteh zera. If he finds the body in a plowed field and a seeded field, mafneu l'sdeh nir. He may move it to the plowed field. Hayu shtehen neirot, shtehen zroot. Or if he finds the body, okay, and both fields are plowed or both fields are seeded, shtehen borot, okay, or right, or two of them are cultivated. Mafnehu l'chol ruach sheyirtzeh. He may move it in whatever direction he so chooses. Okay. Amar Rav Bibi. And now we see the Gemara tries to give an answer. What are we talking about? Says Rav Bibi, Hacha b'meit mutal al hamet zar askina. We're dealing in a situation where the corpse is found, according to one explanation, on a public path. Okay? That's what we're dealing with. Mitoch shenitna reshut lefnoto min hametzar. Why? Because we see that permission has been given to move it from this public path. Mafnehu lechol ruach sheyirtzeh. He may move it in any direction that he so chooses. Okay. Now, back to our Mishnah. We gave the list of 3 things that for which the soldiers in the military camp were exempt. Upturin me rechitzat yadayim. One was that they were exempt from hand washing. Okay, what do we mean from that, right? The Gemara says, Amar Abai, Lo shanu ela mayim rishonim. According to Abai, this was only taught about what we'll call the first washing before the meal. Okay, aval mayim achronim chova. But washing after the meal, okay, was still an obligation. Amar Rav Chia bar Ashi, mipnei ma amru mayim achronim chova. So he validly asks Rav Chia bar Ashi, what was the basis that they said that mayim achronim, later water or water after the meal, is obligated? Mipnei shemelech zdomit. Why? Because of sodomite salt. Yesh shemistame et ha'enayim. Why? Because it's possible that it could blind somebody in their eyes. Amar Abaye. And so Abaye now says as follows, questioning that explanation. Umisha techacha kekorta bakura. But generally you only find a single grain of that sodomite salt mixed in with salt in general. Amar le Rav Acha bereid the Rav le Rav Ashi, and he said to him, Kiel milcha mai. Okay, so he asks him there. Okay, what about this? What measurement are we talking about? Amar le ha lo mebaye. Okay, He says it shouldn't be questioned. Namely, anyone who handles salt, implying anyone who handles salt, okay, should wash their hands afterwards. Okay. New piece from a Mishnah told us that they were exempt from demai, from eating demai. D'tnan, why? Because it was taught, ma'achilin et ha'aniyim demai, that it's permissible to feed poor people demai. Right? Ve'et ha'achsanya demai, and permitted to feed quartered soldiers demai. Amar Rav Huna, says Rav Huna, Tana. This is based on a Tana, a Mishnah statement, right? Bayit Beit Shammai Omrim, says Beit Shammai, Ein ma'achilin et ha'aniyim demai, ve'et achsanya demai. Okay, according to Beit Shammai, okay, they argue, right, that it's not permitted to feed poor people demai or quartered, traveling soldiers demai. Beit Hillel omrim ma'achilin et ha'aniyim demai. But Beit Hillel says it's permitted to feed poor people demai, ve'et achsanya demai, and to feed the traveling soldiers, the quartered soldiers demai. Umila arev. And now we get to our third item, which comes back to our general topic, right? Amrei debe Rabbi Yanai, that in regards to making an eruv, they said in the academy of Rabbi Yanai, lo shanu ela eruvei chatzerot. Here, this was only taught in regards to the making of eruv chatzeros, okay, which permitted carrying one reshus yachid to another. Aval eruvei tchumim chayavim. But we're saying that eruv tchumim, in other words, to carry beyond the usual tchum of 2,000, right? That's different. That's still obligated. The Tani Rabbi Chia, as Rabbi Chia is teaching, Lokin al eruvei tchumim debar Torah. Okay, he argues, right, that that one can incur lashes, all right, if they do not follow the law of eruv tchumim, since it's a Torah mandated requirement. Matkifla Rabbi Yonatan. Rabbi Yonatan challenges this and says as follows: V'chilokin alav sheba'al. Are you telling me that we give malchus for a statement where it may be a prohibition using the word al, okay, and as opposed to, for example, the word lo, okay? Matkif Rav Acha, and Rav Acha then challenges this as well, and said, Ma'acha bar Yaakov, ela me'ata dichtiv al tifnu el ha'avot va'al hayedonim. But we have an example, he says in the Torah, where there is a negative prohibition that says don't turn to the all these kinds of soothsayers and necromancers and all these kinds of things like that, right? Hachinami here too, okay? Delo, okay, do we say that one, if does that, they don't get malchus? Rabbi Yonatan hachi kashale. For Rabbi Yonatan, this was the problem that he had. Lav shenitan lahazarat mitad beitin. That we're talking about prohibitions that were given more as warnings for a potential death penalty by the court. The whole lav shenitan lahazarat mitad beitin em lo kinala. And we say that if it's a prohibition that's given for as a warning by which the court could decide death penalty, we don't punish by malchus. Amar Rav Ashi, miktiv al yotze. So Rav Ashi says, is it really written, don't carry out? Okay. Al yotze, he says, it's written, do not go out. And therefore, by being medayek on the language, Rav Ashi shows, therefore, that is applicable again to its Erev Tchumin only, where one is still obligated in the military camp, but only exempt on the Erev Chatzeros. And so, Hadran Alach Mabui. So we have finished the first parak in Eruvin. Okay, everybody with me? All right? Okay. You remember we came across some discussion about what to do, what they did in terms of wells. Okay? And we're going to see as we start this next parak, this next chapter, a couple of items. Number one, that there are considered two different kinds of wells. One is what we would call basically a cistern, okay, where the water in it had been collected from rainwater, okay? And therefore that was its source. And usually they were round, okay? The second would be more like a well that was actually fed by spring water. So we're going to have two different words for that. The word bor is going to be the word for the cistern, and the word be'er is going to be the word for a spring-fed well. In either case, okay, our concern is, okay, depending on the depth of that item, of that well, okay, it's very much to be considered a Rishus HaYachid, okay? And therefore pulling any water out of it or bringing your animal to drink, okay, means transmitting from a Rishus HaYachid to a Rishus HaRabim, which is prohibited. Therefore, we saw the Gemara tell us that they set up these double posts at corners, okay? L-shaped, I'm going to call them for the moment, L-shaped posts, okay, with certain declarations as to how much space could be between the boards that are used for these L-shaped posts, right? And I'm going to suggest in a moment that we jump over to basically 17b4, if you're using Art Scroll, and you look at diagram A under the notes. And you can see the example that we're trying to define, right? So the question is going to be, what is the size of the opening between these double posts? Okay, and if the opening is too big, okay, do we need to put, as in diagram B, an additional post in the middle? Okay. Elsewhere, the Gemara is going to say, well, wait a second. Maybe we could accomplish the same thing by simply adding another board to the double posts, and therefore reducing the size of the gap. Okay? But in the meantime, I wanted us to look at those diagrams, okay, to give us a sense of what we're going to be talking about. Okay? So we start now on Yud Zayin Amud Beis, the new parak. Okay? Osin pasin lebiraot, says our Mishnah. We may erect boards for wells, cisterns, right? Wells covers both examples of a cistern and a spring-fed well. Arba'a diomdin nir'in, 4 double posts are seen like 8. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Okay? And if you look at our diagram A, you can see what he's referring to. Okay? Rabbi Meir Omer, Shmona Ne'irin Kishnei Masar. If you have 8 of them, then they're going to look like 12. Okay? In other words, if you have to put in the extra one boards in between, okay, like diagram B, then you're going to get a result of 12 in total boards, right? Arba'a diumanim va'arba'a pshutim, says Rabbi Meir. There would be 4 double bore posts and 4 simple, okay, or single posts. Okay? Govhan asarat tfachim, and their height, he says, must be 10 tfachim. V'rochvan shisha, and their width, okay, of each post must be 6 tfachim. Okay? That is what he is arguing. Right? Okay. Now, what happens? We're not done yet. Va'ovyan, and their thickness, kol shahu. And their thickness can be of any amount. Ubeinehem kimelo shtei revakot shel shalosh bakar divrei Rabbi Meir. And therefore, the amount in the gap, okay, needs to be wide enough so that 2 teams of 3 oxen apiece, okay, or 3 cows apiece, okay, 2 teams, I'm going to say, of 3 oxen apiece can pass through. So in other words, I'm thinking one team comes in, another team exits, so that the gap has got to be wide enough for basically 6 oxen. Okay? Devrei Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, says Rabbi Yehuda, shel arba. He says, no, they've got to be wide enough for teams of 4 oxen apiece. Kshurot velo mitorot. That's assuming that they're tied and not loose. Echat nechneset ve'echat yotzeit. One group comes in and another group goes out, right? Ubil, right? Umutar lahakriv la'ba'er ubilvad shetahei para rosha v'ruba bifnim v'shota. Okay, and not only that, he says, but also it's permissible to bring the posts, whether it's the double posts or the single posts, close enough, okay? The hakriv here, close enough to the location of the well itself, la hakriv leba'er, so long as enough of the animal, right, can put its head and the majority of its body, okay, forward and drink. Okay, now we're going to just continue a little bit more. Mutar laharchik kol shahu. He says, the Mishnah, it's permissible to distance these boards, these double posts and single boards, from the cistern itself, ubilvad sheyirbeh b'pasim, so long as one continues to add the necessary number of boards, okay, based on the idea that we have more closed in space than open space. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, ad beit sa'atayim. Rabbi Yehuda says again that there is a limit here up to 2 beis seah. Amrulo, and they said to him, right, the following, right? Sorry, 1 second. Okay. Lo amru beit sa'atayim, ele gaga ulekarpaf. He says, the rabbis, in other words, said to him, challenged him, and they said the law of 2 beis seah only applied to a garden, or it applied to a karpaf, which was like a storage area for wood or for other kinds of things. Okay, some want to suggest, okay, aval im hayadar, if it was a pen for animals, o sahar, or a stable, o muksa, or a area designated for backyard, o chatzar, or a courtyard, afilu beit chameshet kurim, even if it measured up to 5 kur, afilu beit asara kurim, even if it measured up to 10 kur, mutar, it would be permitted to carry. Umutar laharchik kolshu, and basically they argued it's permitted to distance the double posts and the single boards as far as necessary. Ubilvad sheyirbeh b'pasim, so long, okay, as one continues to add additional single boards, okay, so that it reduces the size of the openings, the size of the gaps. And that's where we're going to stop, okay? Today, we'll pick up tomorrow with this long Gemara, okay, clarifying the status of these double posts and the single boards, and how much can go in and out and things like that. Okay?
Thank you, Rabbi.
All right, everybody. Have a good day.
Thank you, everyone. Be well.
Take care, everybody. Be well. Exactly.
You all.
Have a good day.